this lesson, we're going to be working on solving a system of equations, whether two equations or three equations, using augmented matrix on the calculator. In other words, using RREF, which stands for Reduced Row Euclidean Form. So how do we do that? Let's look at the first equation, or first system, which is made up of two different equations. The first step is check if your equations are written in the standard form, which means that the variables are on one side of the equation and the constant is on the other. So basically ax plus by equals to a constant. Now if you look closer at the equations, I can see that x and y are on one side and the constant is on another. And in the second equation also, I have the x and the y on one side of the equation and the -3, the constant, is on the other side of the equation. So yes, it is written in standard form. So once you check that if your equation is written in the standard form, you have to write the augmented matrix. So what is an augmented matrix? You have to have two brackets. The first column stands for x, the coefficients of x. The second column stands for the coefficients of y. And the third column can stand for z if you have a third variable. But in this case, the third column stands for the constant. So let's look at the first equation. We have the coefficient 4 for x. We have the coefficient 3 for y. And the constant is -4. I represent the equal sign by a dotted line, a vertical dotted line, to show where the equal sign is. Now if you look at the second equation, x has the coefficient 3, y has the coefficient -1, and the constant in this case is -3. Now if any of the variables is missing, I represent that with a 0 for that variable. Now this is how you write the augmented matrix. Now how do I put in the values in the calculator? How do I use RREF, so reduced row Euclidean form, on the calculator to find the solution? So let's go ahead and review all of the steps. First of all, I need to put the values in. So how do I put the values or the augmented matrix in your calculator? First of all, you have to get to the matrix inequality. How do you do that? You click on second, and then you click on x -1, which is below the math. If you look closer, you have the word matrix under x to the power -1. So second and then x to the power -1. This is how you get to your matrix menu. Now you need to put the values in, so you need to move over twice to edit. So I need to move over twice to edit. Now the first matrix is going to be my matrix A, so I need to press enter. And then you have to put the dimensions of your matrix. How do I do that? Now let's take a closer look at the matrix. Now the dimensions are represented by row versus column. So I have two different rows, so that's a 2. And then the columns are 3 columns. So it's a 2 by 3 matrix. So these are called the dimensions of the matrix. And this is what you need to put in here. Dimensions of the matrix. So it's a 2, enter. I need to go back. So it's a 2, enter, 3, enter. And if you put the dimensions correct, then you will see a new matrix where you can put in all the values or all the elements. So 4, 3, -4, 3, -1, -3 are called elements of the matrix. So let's put the element 4, press enter, 3, enter, -4, enter, 3, enter, -1, enter, and then -3, enter. Always double check that the dimensions are correct, row and column, and double check that all the elements are correct. Now once you're done entering the values or all the elements, make sure that you quit and go back to the main menu. How do you do that? You press second quit, which is the mode. Now you are at the main menu or main screen. Now let's review how to put the values in. Second, x negative 1 to get to the matrix inequality. Move over twice to edit. Press enter on 1. Make sure that you put the dimensions of the matrix. The first one stands for the number of rows. The second number stands for the number of columns. Then remember to put all of the elements of the matrix in order. Once you're done, remember to click on second mode to get back to the main screen. This is how you prepare your matrix on the calculator. Now, how do you calculate the solution using RREF? To do that, you need to go to second matrix again. Now you move over once to math and you click all the way down until you get to something called B, which is the RREF. You see that? Now you press enter. Now you want to calculate the RREF to what? To matrix A. So you need to go to second, x negative 1, and press enter on 1, because now you're telling the calculator, calculate the RREF to matrix A, the one that you have prepared. Close parentheses and press enter. Now you will always have 1 and zeros over here. Now you always look at the last column to get the solution. The first number is going to be your x and the second number is going to be your y. So x is equal to negative 1 and y is equal to 0, and this is how you enter the solution. So let's go ahead and write that down. The solution is negative 1, 0. Now let's move on to our next example. In our next example, remember, our first step is always to try to put it in a standard form, which is basically ax plus by equals to a constant, c, let's say. Now, I can see that the x and the y are on the left side of the equation. I need to move the constant to the other side. How do you do that? You add 61 to both sides of the equation, and now you end up with 7x minus 5y equals to 61. Now, again, I need to have the 6x next to the 5y. So you add 6x to both sides. So 6x plus 5y equals negative 22. Now remember, always try to put them in order, because this is how you need to put it in the augmented matrix. The x, the y equals to the constant. So always try to put them in order. This is the standard form. Now, let's put the coefficients of x in the first column, so 7 and 6. Let's put the coefficients of y in the second column, so that's negative 5 and 5. Now let's put the constants in the third column, and that's 61 and negative 22, and that's called the augmented matrix. Now the dimensions are the number of rows by the number of columns, so that's 2 rows by 3 columns. That's not 2 times 3, that's 2 by 3. It means 2 rows, 3 columns. So this is not a multiplication problem. 2 by 3. 2 rows, 3 columns. Now, let's reset our calculator to put the values in the calculator. So second plus 7, 1, 2. RAM cleared, because you want your matrix to be empty. Now, how do you enter the values in the calculator? You press second, matrix, move over to edit, press enter on 1, put the dimensions, which are 2 by 3, so 2 enter, 3 enter. Now you put the elements in order, so 7 enter, negative 5 enter, 61 enter, 6 enter, 5 enter, negative 22 enter. Remember to quit before you calculate the RREF. So second, quit, go back to the main screen, okay? Now, let's go ahead and put the elements, or basically calculate the solution. So you click second, matrix, to get to the matrix equation, but now you move on over 1 to math. You can click all the way down to get to B, which is RREF, or you can simply click alpha and then B. And that will give you the REF, okay? Instead of going all the way down. So alpha, B, and it will directly put the value b for you. Now you need to put the matrix that you have prepared, which is matrix A. So you go to second matrix. Once you are here, you are in names, you click enter on 1, and then you have RREF of A, close parentheses, enter. And then remember the solution is going to be the last column, so x is equal 3 and y equals negative 8. Now let's write down the solution, 3 comma negative 8, which means that x is equal 3 and y is equal negative 8. Now let's move on to the second part of this lesson, which is solving system of 3 equations. Again, just like before, you need to check that your equations are written in the standard form. So basically x, y, z in this case are on one side of the equation, as you can see, and the constant is on another. So yes, it's written in the standard form. Now we can move on to step 2, which is write the augmented matrix. Now, remember the first column will represent x, the second column will represent y. Now, since we have a third variable, so z will be my third column, and then I will have the dotted vertical line representing the equal sign, and then I will have the constant. So if I look at the x's, I have 3, 2, 1 as coefficients for x. Y, we have 2, negative 1, and 3. And for the z, I have negative 1, 2, and negative 1. And for the constants, I have 11, negative 3, and 8. So as you can see, you are only interested in only the coefficients of the variables. Now, how many rows is this? 1, 2, 3. So this is a 3 by, and how many columns do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a 3 by 4 matrix. These are the dimensions of the matrix. Now, remember to reset your calculator so you can enter the new values of the matrix. Now to put the values in, you go to second matrix to access the matrix menu. You move over twice to edit, then you press enter. You put the dimensions, so 3, enter, 4. Then you try putting the elements in, so in order, 3, enter, 2, enter, negative 1, enter, 11. Always double check that you're entering the values correctly. Now remember, once you're done entering the dimensions and the elements, you need to quit. So second quit to go back to the main menu. Once you do that, you need now to calculate the RREF. So second matrix to access the matrix menu. You move over once to math. You can go all the way down to RREF, which is B, or simply click on alpha B. Now it will have the RREF on the window. Now you need to put the matrix A, so second matrix, press enter on 1. Now you need to calculate by clicking enter. Now you will always have 1 and zeros in the first 3 columns, and this is how you can tell that your, let's say, steps are correct so far. So the third column will have your solutions. X is going to be equal to, y equals 1, and z equals negative 3. So let's write down the solution. We have 2, 1, negative 3. And that's the solution of this system. Now let's move on to our next example. Remember that your first step is always going to be to put the equations in standard form. So let me zoom in. If you look at the first equation, I have z on the other side, so I need to add z to both sides. Okay? So the first equation is going to be x minus 2y plus z equals negative 7. Now, have you noticed that I'm putting the variables in order? X comes first, and then y, and then z. Now let's move on to our next equation. I also need to subtract x. So my second equation is going to be negative x plus 2y plus 3z equals to 7. And now, as you can see in the third equation, I need to move the constant to the other side. So my third equation is going to be x minus 3y minus 3z equals negative 9. Now I need to put this in the calculator. So let's create the augmented matrix. It's going to be a 3 by 4 matrix. So I need to put the coefficients of x in the first column. So that's 1, negative 1, and 1. So 1x, negative 1x, and 1x. Negative 2y, 2y, and negative 3y. So you are interested in only the coefficients. So negative 2, 2, and negative 3. Now z, you have 1, 3, and negative 3. Now remember, if one of the equation does not have a variable, let's say this is x minus 3y equals negative 9 and z is missing, you put a 0 in the place of z, okay? Now let's move on to our constant. So negative 7, 7, and negative 9. Now don't forget the dotted line representing the equal sign. Now remember to reset your calculator. Now, graph is cleared. Second matrix. Move over twice. Click enter. The dimensions are 3 by 4. Now we need to put the elements in. So y, enter, negative 2, enter, 1, enter, negative 7, enter, negative 1, enter, 2, 3, 7, then 1, negative 3, negative 3, and then negative 9. Now remember, you have to do second quit to go back to the main screen. Now what if you forgot that step? I want to just show you what happens. Now let's say I forgot this step where I have to go back to the main screen by clicking second quit. And I directly go to second matrix, and then you move over once for math. You get the REF by either going down all the way to B or clicking alpha B, okay? Now the calculator will put the REF somewhere here inside the matrix, and you don't want that. And this happened because you forgot the step to go back to the main screen. So let's quit, go back to the main screen. And now click second matrix, over 1 to math, alpha B. Now you need to calculate the REF of the matrix A, so second matrix. Enter 1, then press enter. Now as you can see, you have zeros and 1 everywhere except the third column. So x is negative 3, y is 2, and z is 0. And that's your solution. Okay, now this is our fourth example. Now let's move on to a word problem. Now remember, every time you read a word problem, the first step is to identify your variable. So let's read this word problem. Jackson took $3.50, so $3.50 out of his change jar to buy lunch. He only kept nickels, dimes, and quarters. Remember that. So I have N for nickels, D for dimes, and Q for quarters. So always identify. So N stands for number of nickels, D stands for number of dimes, and Q stands for number of quarters. Now always identify your variables. Now let's write down the equations. And he has how many coins? 20 coins. So that gives me my first equation. N plus D plus Q equals 20. The total number of coins is 20. Now the amount, the value of these coins is $3.50. So remember, you need to multiply the value of the nickel by N plus the value of the dime by D plus the value of the quarter by Q. And that all will give you $3.50. Now let's keep reading to see if we have a third equation. He did, however, grab twice as many dimes as nickels. Twice as many dimes as nickels, okay? So there are more dimes than nickels, so D equals 2N. Now, these are my three equations. I have to make sure I have them written in standard form before I can use the calculator. So NDQ on one side. So my first equation is correct. Now let's look at the second equation. Also, I have n dq on one side, so I'm good with the second equation as well. And now if you look at the last equation, I have 2n on one side, so I need to move it over. So it's going to be negative 2n plus d, and there is no q, so you remember that you have to put that as a 0, so leave some space so you would remember, is equal to 0, because if you move negative 2n to one side, you'll be left with negative 2n plus d and nothing on the other side, so that's a 0, okay? Now let's put the augmented matrix. So for n, I have 1, 0.05, and negative 2. For dimes, I have 1.10, 1. For q, I have 1.25 and 0, since I have no quarters in the third equation. Now let's move on to the constant, so dotted line. The constant is going to be 20, 3.5, so $3.50 and 0. Now let's put this in the calculator. Remember to reset. Second plus 712. Now let's go to the matrix. So second matrix, move over twice to edit, press enter. Now it's going to be a 3 by 4 since 3 rows, 4 columns. The values in order, so the elements 1, 1, and 1. And then I have 20, 0.05, 0.10, 0.25, and then 3.50. Remember, click on enter after every single element. So negative 1, negative 2, 1, and 0, and then 0 again. Once you're done, don't forget to quit. So second quit, then second matrix to calculate the RREF, move over to math, alpha B, then second matrix, enter, close parentheses and click enter again. So my n is 3, my d is 6, the q is 11. If you add them, there are 20 coins in total. So then that means I have 3 nickels, or Jackson has 6 dimes, and 11 quarters. And this is how you use REF to calculate a problem like this. Now I hope this lesson was helpful. Don't forget to do your practice sheet.